This is 3-3, writing functions. So we learned that functions have no double domain and they pass the vertical line test. The domain are the x values, and that would be the independent variable. And the range are the y values, and that would be the dependent variable. So there's different ways that we can represent a function. We can use a table, which we learned in the last section, right here. We can use mapping, which involves numerical order and not repeating numbers. And we could be using an equation, which we haven't really got to yet. The f of x is the same thing as the y, except we're stating that it is a function. So if we're using, this is the same equation. You guys learned y equals mx plus b last year, I'm sure. F of x is really just the same idea, but it's for a function. So we know that that's a function. So whatever it's referring to, we know is going to pass the vertical line test. And then we can represent with a graph. So an equation, like I said, would be y equals 3x minus 8. But if we know something's a function, we can interchange that y with f of x. And that's called function notation. Okay, determine the relationship between the x and the y values. So I'm trying to figure out how to get from this x number to the y number. So to get from 1 to negative 2, there's possibilities of what I could have done. I could have subtracted 3, or I could multiply by negative 2. So let's try it. So if you do 1 minus 3, you get negative 2. And if you do 1 times negative 2, then you get negative 2. So either way, both of these worked, but I need to know if it's going to work for the next set of x, y values. So from 2 to negative 1, 2 to negative 1. Are we subtracting 3 or multiplying by negative 2? And it is that we're subtracting 3. And so you can see that pattern works all the way along. Minus 3, minus 3. So the x value minus 3 results in the y value. So I can rewrite that as y equals x minus 3. If I'm told to write it in function notation, since I know it's a function, the x values didn't repeat, then I could write f of x equals x minus 3. Okay, example B, if it helps you to have it in a table instead, you can, but we're looking to see how I'm getting from the x to the y. So this one I could have added 2, or I could multiply by 3. So I'm going to see the same thing for this. To see which one works. The multiplying by 3 worked here, it works here, and it works here. So that's the pattern. I'm taking the x value, like the 1, and I'm multiplying it by 3, and that results in the y. Well, x times 3 could be written better as 3x. And I can write that, so the y is first if I want. And as a function notation, it would be f of x equals 3x. In order to see which one's the independent and dependent variable, I try to write myself a little statement. The blank depends on blank. Okay, and so in this case, the amount of money, the dance committee is selling tickets for the fall ball. The more tickets they sell, the greater the amount of money. So the amount of money they make depends on the number of tickets sold. So therefore, the amount of money is the dependent variable. It depends on the independent variable. So the amount of money depends on the number of tickets sold. Oops. And sometimes you can argue these, so we can talk about them more in class. Generally, the average price of going to the movies is steadily increased over time. So does the price depend on the time, or does the time depend on the price of the movies? Well, if the price is of the movies is steadily increasing over time, then the price depends on the time. So in this case, the time is the independent, which would be the x, and the dependent, the y value, would be the price. Identify the independent and dependent variables. For example 3, write an equation in function notation. So a lawyer's fee is $200 per hour for her services. So Does the price depend on how many hours, or does how many hours depend on the price? And so we would say that the price, depends on the number of hours. So that means that the price is the dependent and the number of hours is the independent. And then write an equation in function notation. Well, $200 per hour, that's where I'm going to have my variable. So $200 per hour. And it needs to be an equation, but in function notation. So instead of the y, I'm going to replace that with f of x. F of h, I should say, if I'm using h for hours. Minor detail. We're just saying, it's just keeping the same variable in there. I could have said f of x equals 200x. All right, the admission fee for a carnival is $8, and each ride costs $1.50. So you have to pay $8 to walk in the door, plus it's $1.50 per ride. I'll call that x. And so that is equal to my f of x. Okay, so f of 2, well, this is normally f of x, so that means that the 2 is actually the x. So I'm going to take the function that they gave me, f of x equals negative 4x plus 7, but I'm putting a 2 wherever I see x. Now this left side, you don't need to do anything for that because that's just telling me that I'm placing a 2 in for x. So we can just keep carrying it down, like keep writing it, or we can just continue the problem and leave it, just drop it down for the final answer. So negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 plus 7, which is negative 1. So now I can say f of 2 is equal to negative 1. So I'm just plugging in a value like we've always done. Okay, for example B now, we have f of negative 3. So negative 3 is my x. So I'm going to write the original problem, f of x equals negative 4x plus 7. And it's saying that we have to do f of negative 3, but then we're going to be adding 1. So that means that first we're going to plug negative 3 into the stuff that's up above, the negative 4x plus 7. But then we're going to need to add 1. So this is going to be equal to, we have 12 plus 7 plus 1. And 12 plus 7 is 19 plus 1. So this equals 20. So f of negative 3 plus 1 is equal to 20. Okay, h of 4. So now I'm saying that the y is 4. So for h of y is equal to 3/4 y minus 3, I'm going to plug in a 4 to wherever I see the y. So 3/4 of 4, which is 3, minus 3. So that's what I get, 3 minus 3, which is 0. So then I can write my answer as h of 4 equals 0. Now h of 12, again, I start with the original function. H of y is 3/4 y minus 3, and I'm going to plug 12 in. So h of 12 equals 3/4 times 12 minus 3. 3/4 of 12 is 9. I can cross simplify, that's what I'm doing. So divide by 4, so 3 times 3 is 9 over 1, which is 9, minus 3, and h of 12 equals 6. Let's discuss the word problem in class.